Okay, everybody, hi, this is Shay, and this is yet another Illustrator demo. For this one, I want to show you how to use one of the most important tools you need to learn in this software, and that's the pen tool. Pen tool is a way to create shapes. I showed you the basic shape tools where you can create rectangles, rounded rectangles, ellipses, and so on and so forth. And with the pen tool, you can create any kind of custom shape you want. The way the pen tool works is with the pen tool, you click, the first time you click, it puts down a point to which is connected a line. So you put down the start of a line, basically. And as I drag my cursor out, I drag it to the place where I want that line to end. And then I click, and it creates another point. And then I can continue to drag and start a new line that's connected to the previous line, and click, and drag, and click. And if I want to finish this shape, what I do is I go back to my starting point and hover the pen tool over the top of it. You'll see the cursor change slightly. You'll see that little circle, circle outline appear to the bottom right of it. That means that you are about to close this shape. Okay, and most of the time when you're creating a shape in Illustrator, you want it to be closed so you can fill it and it will behave properly. Okay. Something else I like to do when I'm working in Illustrator is I like to check here when I'm working with the pen tool drawing out a shape. Down here, this is one of the places you can set your color for your object and a stroke. Now, if I reverse this so that I have a black fill and no stroke, when I start to draw out a new shape, on the third point, it fills that between the first and the most recently created point. So you can kind of get an idea what the shape looks like. That's fine until you get into a more complex shape, and sometimes it can be a little confusing. So rather than do that, I always like to make sure that I have no fill color and have a black stroke. The quick and easy way to do that is if I click on this two-headed arrow here, it just swaps those. It gives it no fill and moves the black to the stroke. And then I can just work along an outline of my shape. So the pen tool is basically click, release the mouse button, position the mouse where you want the next point, and if you hold down the shift key, you can constrain it to angles so you can have a little more control. It's a 45 and a 0 and a 0 and a 45 and a 90 and a minus 90, or I guess that's 180. But you can kind of constrain it so that you can get much more controlled shapes. Okay. The other thing about the pen tool, and this is where it starts to get a little tricky, is that if I click the pen tool and hold the mouse button down, hold the left mouse button down, and then drag, you'll see these two handles appear. Now, when I release that, it doesn't seem to affect anything, but I move to wherever the next point is going to go, you'll see that now it's drawing out a curved line. So if I click and drag again, I create another point with two handles, which then I can assume is going to create a curved line. And click and drag again. And click and drag again and drag that out. And now I've got a shape with no hard angles. They're all curves. What you can do is if you use the direct selection tool, you can reshape these by grabbing a point. If I grab this point and drag it, you'll see how that handle is kind of affecting that curve. Okay, and then I can also click on, and sometimes this is a little tricky, clicking on that handle, I can reshape it. And you see as I drag this in, it affects the curve to the left As I drag it out, it slightly affects the curve to the left. And as I move its position, things change in a very smooth way. So I can go in and reshape an object however I want by grabbing these handles and moving them. And it still retains this nice curved shape. Okay. So in this way, if I wanted to, I could click out just a circle by Shift, Shift, and it'd be a fairly rough circle. More of an oval shape. Okay. You can also create shapes with both curved and straight lines. So if I click and release, and then click and drag, and then click, and then click, I can now start to combine curved shapes with straight lines. Okay? So that allows you a little more freedom in the creation of your shapes. The other thing is I can drag out a shape or click out a shape just with angular corners. If I click and hold on the pen tool and look down here on anchor point tool and select that, what that allows is it allows me to change the type of anchor point that I have. Here they're angular. If I click and drag, it now becomes a curved anchor point. Click and drag, it's curved again, and you can drag this to create, a fairly organic shape. So these 2 points now have curves. And then the 2 previous points that I didn't change with the anchor tool. Just a second here. And like I said, sometimes this is just really tricky to grab these handles. It's frustrating, but you'll eventually get used to it. I didn't change these, so I get this nice sharp change of direction. I get this nice pointed corner here. And that's because when I created the shape initially, it was click, click, and click instead of click and drag and click. Okay, so there's a big difference in how you create those points. If I now go in and do anchor point on one of these, I've now changed that shape and the way that corner interacts. So that may be something you want to do, something you don't want to do, but something you should kind of play around with and get used to how it works. Something else I want to show you with the pen tool is, let's zoom up a little bit. If I take the pen tool and just hover, you'll see this blue line. That's the actual line you're working on. Sometimes it helps to give that a thinner stroke, and again, that's under Window Stroke. We'll call up that palette. So you can give that a thinner stroke to get a better idea of what that line looks like, or you can work in the outline mode, which you can only then see the line. You don't see any of the stroke you've applied, any of the color or anything. You only see the actual outline. So as I hover over this line, I see the icon for the pen tool change from this asterisk to a plus sign, and I've just added, because this is a curved line, I've added a point that has 2 handles and behaves like a curved line that I can then reshape. So I can go in and I can continue to click and add points that can be edited. Oh, I added 2 points there. I clicked too fast, I think. Oh, I clicked on an existing point, I guess. If I click here, you'll see that I can, again, reshape that. What I can also do is I can subtract points with the pen tool. So if I go in and select my shape, get my pen tool, and I want to get rid of a point, I can just hover over it. You'll see the icon changes now to a pen with a minus, and click, and I've deleted that point. We'll do the same here. Now I'm working on a Mac, and you see me going up here to switch these different tools all the time. I'd be working with the pen tool, and then I want to move something. I'm going here to grab the direct selection tool. On the Mac, if I hold down the command key, you'll see that the cursor changes to the direct selection tool, and that I can then start to work on that. Instead of having to go here every time I want to move something, I can click, add a point, command, click, and reshape that. And I release the command key, I'm back to the pen. I can go in and add, and then command, click. And that's a real time saver eventually. Um, and I just showed you the anchor point tool where you can change an anchor point. Again, on the Mac, that is the Option key. And I can click and change these types of points. Okay. And then I can again hold down the Option key and click and go in the opposite direction. And make a straight line into a curved line without having to jump up here and jump through these. These are the modifiers. So if you're using a PC, this will tell you how to switch tools. So the pen tool, on a Mac, I can select P. I can be on another tool and hit the P tool, and it should jump to the pen tool. And then I can select the plus or hit the plus key, which gives me the pen with the plus sign, the minus key, pen with the minus, and then Shift C will give me this tool. So there are a couple different ways to access these tools, but I'd like to just jump to the pen tool and use either the Option key command to do that. Or the command key to go in and grab my points as I'm working on it. So get used to some of these keyboard shortcuts. They really make things go quite a bit faster. So that's kind of the gist, the basics of how the pen tool works. You really need to learn to use this tool. It's one of the more important tools for Photoshop or Photoshop Illustrator because it also is present in Photoshop, and it can make a real big difference in the way you use Photoshop too. It's also used in InDesign. So play around with this particular tool, learn how to use it, learn what the add anchor point tool does and the delete anchor point tool does, and the anchor point tool. Get used to clicking out shapes with straight lines by click, release, click, release, click, release, click, release, click, release, and shapes with curved lines, click, drag, release, click, drag, release, click, drag, release, drag, release, and then a combination of two. Click, 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 drag, and click. So take some time learning how to build shapes that way. Uh, Once you kind of really understand how to use Illustrator, it's a lot of fun. It's a really fun program to use, and I believe a lot of this should be fun. And so I would like for you to take some time to just play around. Obviously, you want to work toward getting your project done, but there's a real benefit in just playing with the software and trying to have some fun with it and see what's fun about it. That always helps to motivate you if the job you're doing is also fun. So play around with Illustrator and check it out. And I'm going to have a couple more videos for you. The next one's going to be on creating a PDF from an Illustrator file, which you will need for your discussion board uploads, the in progress things. So I'm going to show you that. And then I'll do one that takes you through my process of creating a logo in Illustrator. So be sure and watch for those.